Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the 17th edition of TKI Offshore Energy Live. Are offshore wind farms not simply new exotic species in the North Sea? Well, today we'll discuss how we can offer the most significant possible benefits to the nature of the North Sea while placing hundreds of wind turbines. Because we face a devilish dilemma. We are generating sustainable energy to combat climate change, but simultaneously, offshore wind farms impact the North Sea's ecosystem. And there's no time to first acquire all the necessary knowledge about the impact of offshore wind. Well, we question how to make the best of these new exotic species. And we do this from a unique location. We are at Naturalis. And I'm here with Willem Renema, Research Group Leader for Marine Biodiversity here at Naturalis. I'm looking at pots with fishes and species. Where are we here at Naturalis?
Yeah, we are here at Naturalis in the collection, so our holy grail, our most important topic for study. And this is the Natural History Archive of the Netherlands.
Wow, it looks really impressive, but you immerse yourself daily in the North Sea's ecosystem. What do you research here at Naturalis?
We look at the biodiversity of the North Sea, and that is very, very broad. But what we look at is, for example, which species are there, but how many are there, and how are their dynamics, how are they related to each other, and how do they interact between each other.
Why is that research necessary?
Because the North Sea is one of the fastest changes seas in the world, actually. And every time something changes, then you get new interactions between species, and you have your ecosystem that has to adjust to those new conditions.
Okay, and what does Naturalis specifically do? Why is Naturalis important for the North Sea?
Well, the North Sea is very important for Naturalis because it's our sea, so to speak, the largest sea in the Netherlands. And we want to know everything that is there in the Netherlands, and the North Sea is 2/3 of the surface of the Netherlands. So we need to know what is in the North Sea, and that's why it's important.
Could you give a percentage of how much we think we know about the North Sea?
That is very hard. The main thing I know is that most of what we are looking for and most of what is used in policy making is about, well, what we always call the 5% of species that most people know, the birds, the cetaceans, the whales and the seals, the bats in fact, but only a few species that are really important for policymakers that people really look at. And then there is everything else that hardly anybody looks at, but that is at least as important as those. If the small organisms, if the organisms nobody ever sees, are not there, then you won't have the big ones either.
What are these that the policymakers look at always?
Birds, seabirds, porpoise, seal, cod, sabellaria and oyster.
And the rest is as important, as you say?
Is at least as important, but is not enigmatic, is not somehow some group that is associated with it, that likes it. And that is why they are not included in these things. But if you don't have that, then you won't have the other either. So we need to know how this all connects. You
do a lot of research. What is the most remarkable thing you've discovered?
Ooh, that's a very hard question. For me, the realization of how the North Sea changes, so how that has changed through time, all the time, and how these dynamics match together to get the ecosystem functioning, that is for me, we find new species and all that. That is nice, but that's not, it's in the end, it's how it works.
I see there's all things standing here. What are we looking here at behind us?
No, this is one of the very special things. This is the eggs of the flapper skate. That is a huge ray, about my size in wingspan.
And it lives in the North Sea?
It used to live in the North Sea, okay, and has disappeared. And for example, this shows why collections are important, because this shows the historical contact. Because it has often been said that these do not really reproduce around the Netherlands because they don't like cold. Cold. They do like cold because they occur in Scotland, but they like more rocky surfaces, and they say like, oh, the Netherlands is all sandy, so you don't have these. But these actually are collected just north of Schiermonnikoog, so they were actually here. But these eggs take 1.5 years to hatch, so yeah, you need 1.5 years of quietness to keep these populations alive. And then you just have the young, and they are just really small, and that take years and years before they are large. So this is one that is very sensitive to fishing, and that is what we have seen in the North Sea, that the biomass of the really large organisms has reduced for really, really extensively in the past 50 years.
What makes the North Sea so unique, you think, in your opinion?
Well, for me it is that this is, the Netherlands, we advocate ourselves as one of the countries that knows most about their biodiversity. But then if you look at what we actually know about what is in the North Sea, that is just flabbergastingly little. And that is what makes it special. It's on our doorstep, but we still, there's so many things I can't answer.
So there's a huge sea to discover.
There's a huge sea to discover.
Can I invite you to join us at our table with the other guests?
And welcome to our webinar, TKI Offshore Energy Live. And thank you for joining us either live here at Naturalis or online. And while we're waiting for Willem and Sophie to join us at the table, we're going to have a look at the trailer of a very interesting movie made by one of our guests today, Peter van Roduinen, who sits next to me, The Wild North Sea.
I am Peter van Roduinen. As a diver and cameraman, I've explored the world's oceans, but the sea closest to home remained undiscovered. The North Sea. One of Europe's largest and most mysterious nature reserves. Dive with me and discover a hidden wilderness like you've never seen before. Journey across borders into the unknown wild world of the North Sea.
Wow, wow, what an impressive trailer that is. Welcome everybody. Welcome online and live here at the Naturalis Biodiversity Center. We are very happy to have you here with us today and online, of course. And thanks to Naturalis, of course, for providing us with this wonderful location. Let's start with a question for our live audience. Who in the audience has already seen the movie The Wild North Sea? Please raise your hand. Yes, yes, I see 3 people. Please, people, go and see this if you haven't yet, because It's amazing, I think. Well, we'll talk about that some more later on. A practical note, when you watch our webinar live online, you can ask questions via the chat or via the comments under the LinkedIn stream. So, Bob, you will keep an eye on that.
Absolutely.
Yes, perfect. Let me introduce our guest to you. Peter, let's start with you. Wonderful images we already saw. Peter van Rodijnen, congratulations for already attracting over 50,000 visitors, I think.
And still counting, yeah.
And still counting.
Yep,
welcome at our table. You filmed the wildlife in the North Sea for 6 years and produced this exceptional documentary. It's really an honor to have you here.
Thank you.
Yeah, welcome. Well, let's give him an applause. Yeah, you're live. Also at our table is Teun Strikkers, a researcher and advisor at Drift. You're an expert on how systems change. And why you're here exactly we'll get to in a minute. It's really good to have you as our guest today. Teun Strikkers.
Thank you so much.
And of course, once again, welcome Willem Renema, Research Group Leader, Marine Biodiversity, a mouthful, I think, at Naturalis here. We got to see a wonderful peek at your collection a few minutes ago. And you'll provide us with the scientific perspective on the state of the North Sea. Willem Renema. And finally, welcome back, Bob Meijer, Director of TKI Offshore Energy, and my trusted co-host, of course. Bob, first question to you. 670 wind turbines in the Dutch part of the North Sea today, around 1,700 in 2030. If we take an average of 15 megawatts per turbine, we need around 20,000 wind turbines to achieve the ambitions of the North Sea countries combined. Is there still space for wildlife in the North Sea?
These are very big numbers, Sophie, and we're also faced with a number of challenges. So rolling out and scaling up offshore wind energy or offshore energy in general poses some challenges for us. That's clear. And some of these challenges are, for example, in the use of materials, raw materials, circularity. Other challenges are more in the area of how we can integrate these vast amounts of renewable power in our energy system. But also spatial planning and ecology poses challenges for us. And for this, we have our innovation program. That's really what TKI Offshore Energy is, the innovation and research program. So we want to develop new knowledge and also systems and tools to be able to counter these challenges. Now, this webinar is not so much about offshore energy as such. So we really want to change the perspective. We want to take the perspective of the North Sea itself. Of this enormous, vast, beautiful ecosystem. Beautiful, we can really see that from the images from the wild North Sea. And with that perspective, we also look at other, say, human activities also on the North Sea. And so offshore energy is one of them, but there are many more. And I think we have a picture of that where you can see the various, say, ecological pressures that exist on the North Sea due to human activities. And I think if you put yourself in the position of the North Sea, this is what you see what's coming. So there are so many activities historically, but also in the future that will impact us. And not in the least, climate change. That's going to have a big impact on the North Sea ecology. And so we borrowed this picture from Natuur en Milieu and Stichting de Noordzee, who've put this together. But I think it visualizes really that a change in perspective is really important to look at the North Sea from the perspective of the North Sea itself. Yeah. So I'm really looking forward to the discussions in this webinar.
Yeah. Thank you so much for this introduction, Bob. And this graphic, we see a lot of things going on. We are going to discuss this. Teun, let's start with you. Changing a system so that nature and economics are balanced. Is that possible?
It's for sure possible if we want it as a society. So it's really about that we set that goal for ourselves and that Yeah, I do think we need to change how we organize our economy, right? But it's also about how we include those non-human actors, as we call them. So there could be fish, but also other plant species, etc. So I think it's very important to consider everyone.
Yes, and it is possible. So that's the good news about that. Let's talk about wildlife. Peter, I'll start with you. You've brought the North Sea to everybody's attention on a fantastic way. In your perspective, why is it so important for us to be more aware about the beauty of the North Sea?
That's the only way you can love it. I mean, everybody knows the North Sea. We've seen it before, but nobody's got a clue what's going on underneath the waves. And we're the few to be able to dive there to see it, and it was our mission to bring that to life and show it to the wide audience. And that's the starting point of a bit of respect, a bit of love, a bit of careness, a bit of maybe including her in a different way of all the discussions and economical pressure going on at the moment. So yeah, that's the main reason for us, just to make the wide audience, not only in the Netherlands, but I think in whole Europe, just acquainted with the North Sea like she's never seen before.
Yeah, and you can't love, you can't protect what you don't know. So
exactly.
It's really important to get to know the North Sea.
Yeah.
Willem, I heard you say a few minutes ago, you think we don't focus enough on protecting the right things, don't you?
Yeah, well, as a follow-up, it's not only it's also what you don't know, you don't see, and that I saw that long ago when I was, I don't know, reading I think a book by Maarten het Hart, and I saw that, and that's really true. If you don't see, what you don't know, you don't see. And in the North Sea, yeah, we do not see a lot. We are terrestrial organisms, and that's life below the sea. And so it's really important to also look at what we don't see. And currently, policy is mostly about what we call the charismatic 5%. That are all things we see. That are the birds above the water. That are the porpoises. The seals.
It's a beautiful face there.
Yeah, yeah, we like that, and that's lovable, and so we protect it. But these things are only there because there's a system below it, and that extends from really, really small organisms into larger organisms, and that's a network, and we need to understand that network that allows these seals to be here.
Yeah, they cannot live without.
They can't live.
95%.
Exactly.
The other species. Peter, you saw the whole ecosystem through your lenses.
I think it's just a tiny bit. I mean, the whole ecosystem is huge. And one thing I've learned is that I really don't know a lot. I mean, there's still so much to learn. Absolutely.
What was the most surprising discovery you made about the North Sea ecosystem during filming?
That is much more complex than you think. We humans like to put it into in a perspective to be able to repair it. Like a complex machine with all nuts on it, so we can fix the problem. But the ecosystem of marine life is completely different than ecosystems on land, and that makes it much more interesting. And it's a net. It's woven in all kinds of ways. And I think it's stronger than we think, and it's stronger than we as well.
Why do you think that?
I mean, in the end, that's maybe a bit. We humans tend to destroy a lot, but in nature just keeps on going, especially in the marine ecosystems. I mean, you just need the right conditions, and then you got an explosion of certain species at one point, maybe they were gone a year ago. It's different than the flapper skates or the long-living species. That's much more complex and takes much more time. But the resilience, just throw in a rock, and within a month it's overgrown, and within a year you can't find it back because it's full of life. And that makes it gives you hope. Because it just needs a little bit of time, a little bit of space, less human pressure, and it revives, and it revives much bigger than we ever thought of.
I see you nodding, you both, Teun and Willem. Would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, I think this is really interesting. This resilience, I think it's also needed in us, and also on how we protect it in a way, right? So it's about, if we want to have this structural change to protect or to work with the North Sea in a more meaningful way, we need to have that resilience.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's there, and the only thing we humans just need to do is just give her a bit of space. I mean, there's a lot of pressure on any marine ecosystems, and North Sea is no exception on that. But it just and the part is the North Sea is one of the most heaviest used seas in the whole wide world, and it makes it even more used with all the wind turbines being built at the moment. I mean, every time we sailed out, there was an extra row of turbines standing there. It's more like it's becoming less sea and more industrial grounds. It's changing absolutely, and so we don't make it easy for her, but just give her a bit of space and.
Yeah, about this resilience, I think 2 days ago or yesterday in the news there was an item about a new species that was discovered, a new cucumber. And I think that's a great example that also biodiversity is changing, is increasing maybe there as well. That was, I think, during an action of cleaning up the North Sea with divers.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, the thing is, it's not a new species. I mean, it's been there for ages probably, but
we didn't know it
exactly.
Yet.
That's the whole thing. Just like Willem said, we just don't know that much about the North Sea. And with the expeditions, they go out diving for a week or so, and so it's more a bit more intense than, and then you get a bit more information, but still it's little.
How important it is to go down there and look.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah.
Or measure. Yeah.
Willem, what strikes you the most about the North Sea ecosystem?
Well, in part the same, like the resilience, the capacity to get new air. If you give time, then you get a nice system. But there's also a part of perspective. We say resilience, but the ecosystem now is different from the ecosystem in the past. And the ecosystem in the future will be, because apart from being our sea, it's also one of the fastest warming seas in the world. So climate change will have a really big impact, and we already see that. We see that some species get less. We see that other species increase. And also, we already see that even in the fisheries. So that some species are targeted less and others are targeted more. So it's a dynamic system, and we really have to focus on restoring nature and not necessarily one specific aspect of nature, but just let it go, give it time, space, and then the North Sea will hopefully recover.
Okay, but Teun, how essential is it for a systematic change to happen to fight for something that we love so much?
It's essential that you have passion for it, right? To change, but I think it's also about how we collectively do this, and with what kind of actors we do this. Mm-hmm. That we put together the people that actually love it and want to contribute, and hopefully also connect that with policymakers or different organizations, not across only in the Netherlands, but in a wider context, and then to together sort of create this space and time that is necessary, right? For those eggs that we saw in the video, that is 1.5 years. And I think that's the bottleneck sometimes with us humans, is that we tend to think very short-lived and in causes and effects that are perhaps only minutes away. So I think it's very important that we give time and money as well.
Are all the actors open for this vision to...
I think it's important that not all will be open, but it's important that you start and that you start talking, but also start doing, not only talking. So that you connect parties or organizations that are working together, and they face bottlenecks for sure, and that you collectively can help each other, and then build a movement from there.
Mm-hmm. Did you see the change in these 6 years that you've been filming?
No.
What kind of change did you see?
No, that's very hard to say. I mean, and in the end, it's just what is it, 30 minutes, 40 minutes that you're down there on a specific site, and you return then maybe next year or 2 years later. So there's no conclusion. But I don't know. The changes. Therefore, you just dive too little and you know too less. That's very hard to say.
It's really big, also.
It's big. It's huge. Yeah. That's true. And you see a bit of like the impact on global warming of the sea, a bit of shifting of the species. You see species which used to live more south in France and something like that, and the colder species go up north. So you see a bit of a shift. But that's even then it's just in a couple of years. It's very hard to say that there's a trend or there's a change. What's affecting that? I mean, next year, if the current is differently, then there can be a drop of a certain species massively, and the next year it can be gone because there's El Nino coming over again or whatever. That's difficult to say.
Yeah. Willem, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And that's why we want to make these observations rather than spot observations where there is an occasional observation, somebody dives. Usually, well, certainly when you dive, you don't do it in Windforce 9. But that is, I mean, 9 is maybe a bit exceptional, but bad weather is common on the North Sea. And so you have to see what is happening in these kind of conditions as well. So we want to move from these spots measurements to time-resolved measurements at certain spots. So that we can observe also timing of, because that is likely going to be a big change in the North Sea. That's not so much which species are there, but more the timing of certain species to occur. And if a fish larvae is depending to feed on plankton, if the larvae is there before the plankton bloom is there, then there might be a problem.
Yeah.
But we just don't have the data that we can actually. We can think that this is a problem, but we cannot show that this is a problem because we don't have the data for that.
But what do you think the ecosystem needs, in your perception, to strengthen?
Time.
Right.
For me, it's really. It has been said before, but we have this perspective that we do something and then it's better. But nature doesn't work like that. And you can maybe assist a bit, but in the end, nature has to do it themselves. And I think that the North Sea has changed over from a really highly productive sea to a much lower productive sea at the moment, or maybe not all the production is used in the entire ecosystem. I don't know, but something has changed, and only time can give. And then still, some things will never come back. The flapper skate, that will be really hard because you eat. It's a long generation time, so you really need a lot of time. Mm-hmm. So then that would be a project for 150 years.
And space, is that also important? The time?
Well, everybody is asking for space, so that you see, you hear immediately this is a new large wind farm, and then but then we can't fish there anymore. And in my perspective, it's like then you can't fish there anymore, but maybe nature can come back.
Maybe that's good.
Yeah, but there's always competition. We saw that graph. That is all about space. Everybody wants to use. There's shipping. There's whatever.
And the international dimension, I think, as well.
Talking about this, Peter, what did you find during filming on how human activities such as fishing and wind farms impacted the delicate balance in the North Sea ecosystem?
There is a balance, of course, but the balance is flexible, and the impact of humans is enormous. There's a period of time was it 20 years ago, the unbridled fishing was just too heavily, and that makes us realize that we had to work with quota and stuff like that. So and that works, and it's probably the same with the wind farms, the old parks. It's more complex because the building, like you said before, is going faster than the development of our knowledge about it. And so we might in 30 years' time we might regret what we're doing right now. And so it's, I don't know, it's difficult. But on the other hand, we need different kind of energy. And so it's hard to say that you just stop building or do less or whatever, but it's much more complex.
Thank you. Yeah, you want to comment on that?
I think one last comment would be also be adaptive in this development.
Exactly.
Right, so that you mentioned that the timing is changing of perhaps certain species, but that you monitor that while you develop and have that opportunity to delay or move and build that into the process.
Yeah, I think this is why also, say, research and knowledge development is so important that we do this. And we want to keep, of course, the balance. We want to, I would say, enhance the ecosystem while we have these human activities. I think
that's the movie.
Yeah.
Talking about that, I want to ask a question to the audience, because who thinks offshore wind farms can be nature reserves? Half. A little hesitating there. Not fully risen hands, I think I see, but half. So there's some positivity on that, I think. What do we think?
But it's also a good thing that not everybody raises the hand entirely, because there's absolutely a downside on building the farms. Just put it into perspective. I mean, if you look at the wind turbines, it's just 1% of the whole surface is hard, rocky surface, and the rest is still sandy bottom. And it's, I mean, the building is with lots of impact. And that's my question on the end. What will happen in 30, 40 years time?
Yeah,
that's complex.
Agree. We don't know a lot about the North Sea yet. We need time. We need to let nature do its job. Thank you so much for understanding and improving our understanding of the North Sea and to strengthen our love for it. Thank you very much, Peter. Thank you very much, Teun. Your seats will be taken in a minute. But before we do that, give them a big applause, Peter and Teun. Thank you much for your contribution. There are several activities in the North Sea to enhance the ecosystem. And the Rich North Sea is active for 5 years, and we have a video on their impact. And let's take a look to see their results.
De Noordzee is prachtig en het grootste natuurgebied van ons land. Maar het gaat helaas niet goed met de Noordzee-natuur. Door intensief gebruik, klimaatverandering en ziektes zijn nagenoeg alle natuurlijke riffen verdwenen. Medewerkers van Natuur en Milieu en Stichting de Noordzee vroegen zich af: kunnen wij de natuur helpen om weer sterker te worden? En zouden windparken daarvoor ingezet kunnen worden? Ons uitgangspunt, de funderingen en steenbestortingen rondom windmolens op zee, zijn ideale locaties om kunstmatige riffen aan te leggen. Deze riffen kunnen vervolgens zeeleven aantrekken dat zich daar kan vestigen. Samen met Van Oort en Eneco ontwikkelden we een pilot in het windpark Eneco Luchterduinen, waar we oestertafels op de bodem plaatsten. Daar leerden we veel van, ook wat niet werkt. Maar de potentie van ons innovatieve idee groeide. We durfden te dromen van een rijke Noordzee. Rijk aan natuur en vol leven. En dankzij financiering van de Nationale Postcode Loterij werd die droom werkelijkheid. Inmiddels zijn we 5 jaar verder en hebben we een grote variatie aan praktijkprojecten opgezet. Een prachtig voorbeeld is Windpark Blauwwind. Daar zijn 2400 oesters op oestertafels uitgezet. Ze gedijen goed op de voet van de windmolens en afgelopen zomer bleek dat ze voor nageslacht hebben gezorgd. In Windpark Gemini zijn in een gebied van 5 hectare verschillende soorten schelpmateriaal geplaatst, met daarbovenop volwassene oesters. Samen met Ørsted doen we onderzoek naar het gedrag van kreeften die we voorzien hebben van zenders. Wij weten nu dat kreeften langer op de plek blijven om te fourageren. Samen met Vattenfall onderzoeken we het effect van waterverversingsgaten in de holle funderingen van windturbines en kijken we of de binnenkant van een turbinepaal een geschikte schuilplaats is voor kleine dieren. In Windpark Eneco Luchterduinen is de nieuwste generatie oestertafels geplaatst. Daar hebben we de oesters op verticale palen geplakt. Samen met Eneco en Van Oort onderzoeken we of de oesters zich hierdoor beter ontwikkelen. Onze structuren testen we vooraf op schaal in een watergoot of op ware grootte in onze offshore testsite in de Noordzee. Om de natuur in windparken een kickstart te geven, zijn grote hoeveelheden gezonde jonge oesters nodig. Juist zij spelen een cruciale rol omdat ze water filteren, riffen bouwen en daarmee ander zeeleven aantrekken. In Zeeland is daarvoor een kweeklijn opgezet. Dankzij veel inzet en geduld heeft Nederland nu parasietvrij platte oesterbroed voor natuurprojecten beschikbaar. Een mijlpaal waar we trots op zijn. Dankzij de inzet van innovatieve monitoringstechnieken hebben we geleerd dat zeeleven zich kan vestigen rondom windmolens en dat grote structuren inderdaad een rifeffect nabootsen. Dat het zeeleven de steenbestorting rondom windmolens gebruikt als nieuw leefgebied. De pioniersoorten zijn er al en we hopen dat andere soorten snel zullen volgen. Maar wat we bovenal geleerd hebben, is dat we het niet alleen kunnen. Van een klein kernteam zijn we uitgegroeid naar een invloedrijke organisatie en werken we samen met wetenschappers, start-ups, politici, offshorebedrijven en eigenaren van windparken. We zijn trots op wat we gedaan hebben en de manier waarop. Onze droom vergt innovatie, een ondernemende geest, uithoudingsvermogen en een netwerk van partners. We delen alle bevindingen en resultaten met elkaar en uiteindelijk verzamelen we een schat aan informatie in onze openbaar toegankelijke toolbox. De rijke Noordzee heeft laten zien dat natuurversterking in windparken mogelijk is. Maar de ambitie voor meer wind op zee is enorm en de natuur komt hierdoor nog meer onder druk te staan. De uitrol van versterkende maatregelen en bescherming van de Noordzeenatuur is hoog nodig. Nu meer dan ooit.
Very interesting to see, I think. Before we continue, for those of you watching online, please feel free to ask your questions via the chat. So we have two new guests at our table. Welcome Eline van Onselen, ecologist at the Rich North Sea.
Thank you.
Beautiful to see you, what you are doing. And your organization is active in offshore wind farms with projects that enhance the circumstances for the nature.
True.
Yep.
Yep.
I said it right.
Yes.
Thank you. Please give her a big hand. And also a warm welcome to you, Jaime Asensio of Reefy. Years ago, you traveled from Mexico to the Netherlands to improve artificial reefs. And that led to much more, I think, did it?
Yeah, thanks for having us here. And really nice to have all these diverse perspectives on the challenges and opportunities in the North Sea. And indeed, I'm from Mexico, 7 years already here in the Netherlands. And I saw that there was already a lot of potential on changing how everything that is already built on the water to have an impact that can be positive instead of negative. So that's our vision and the steps that we're taking.
Okay, Jaime. Thank you. Eline, to start with you, with the project of the Rich North Sea, you simply begin. You just do it.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Well, we see, of course, the energy transition going, and it's something. It's really a train that's going, and we can't stop it. We see it happening in front of our eyes, and there's a lot of risks involved for nature in building the offshore wind farms. But we also see opportunities, and if we do nothing, then nothing will happen, right? Or it will happen way too slow. And the thing is, especially with legislation, that people require sort of proof of concept. They want to know something 100% before it can be implemented. And that's sort of a chicken and egg problem, because if you do nothing or you do extensive research and it takes, well, maybe 10 years before you find your answer, then it's too late. So we need to do something now.
You just start and do it. That's really
We start to do it, yeah, as far as we can, of course, because there is limitations in what we can do. But we need to do experiments, we need to do pilot projects to see what's happening, right? And then we can learn from it, and then we can build upon that.
Mm-hmm. And Jaime, you're an engineer. How difficult is it to communicate with the people like Eline, like ecologists?
Oh, first of all, applause to what the Rich North Sea is doing, because we have been working together already for 4 years, more or less. And indeed, you can see that enhanced action and to to learn and to improve. And as an engineer, we see that there's a lot of stakeholders on the table, but ecologists and engineers sometimes don't speak the same language, creating a lot of challenges and missing those opportunities of us coming on the water.
And how do you deal with that?
Well, an example is the North Sea used to have some hard substrate that now is gone because of troll fishing that removed that hard substrate and keep removing it, keep moving the sediments from left to right. And now by installing offshore wind farms, there is a big opportunity that that hard substrate is back to the North Sea, and that can kickstart the conditions for oysters and other organisms to come back to the North Sea as how it used to be. But of course, these rocks, they need to remain on place, because if they keep moving from left to right, they will kill everything that was living in there. So as engineers, we design when something is unstable, and we see that the requirements that RVO and the Dutch government are taking are great steps. So we see that it's a pioneering step in the North Sea, how requirements on nature might take almost half of the points sometimes on tender evaluations. So it's great to see, including overwater and underwater. But the engineering aspect of rocks moving, we see that there's still a lot more to do. And that's also driven because of economic factors. So at this moment, for example, in the last tender IFAIR, we saw that the government required that at least 20% of the rocks that were placed on offshore wind, they need to be statistically stable. What does that mean? That they won't move at all. But there is a different term called dynamically stable, which means that they can move, but remain on the same place. So you can imagine that for an oyster already being settled there, if they move every year, well, it will be very difficult to survive. So we see that that percentage of statistically stable is increasing, which is a great step, but there's a lot more to do. So we see that the government decided to make a 1-year storm statistically stable, so that's like a storm that happens more or less every year. And but if a storm happens every 2 years, they will still move. So we need to start designing, if we want to really have this succession of species like the ray, then it's 1.5 years of an egg to just hatch. They need to be at least 2 years without moving. So I think the next step will be to include nature in the formula as well, so we can take the decision that nature is the best solution, but it was just not in the formula yet. Now it's being seen as an extra cost instead of a benefit for everyone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's
interesting. And in your view, because one of the remarks that Peter also made before the break, that there are spots where there is this hard substrate and new species can develop, but they may not be interconnected. So will it grow automatically? Will that enhance beyond the area of the hard substrate?
Yeah.
Maybe that's more an ecological question for Elina, I don't know.
Do you want me to answer it? Or do you want
I think for sure you have more skills, and then maybe...
Well, automatically it's quite a large world, but yeah, nature will develop. If it gets a chance, it will develop. And if you have a hard substrate area, it will develop in a different way than it will in the sandy habitat, right? But because we're working in the water, everything is connected. So there's a lot of species that have free-floating larvae that live in the water column, and as soon as they float, they can travel, right? So you don't need to settle next to where you were born. Yeah. And that makes it interesting, because then you can create hotspots of biodiversity and of production for the rest of the space that you have. And then they can also travel to other hard substrate spaces. And this can be man-made, like, artificial reefs or wind turbines, but they can also be wrecks or natural reefs. Yeah.
And Willem already stated that we should be patient with nature. We talked about that already. What's your view on that?
I totally agree. And we need to be patient, we need to give it time and space, both of these. And we need to realize that we're working in a degraded system, right? We've been over-exploiting our Dutch North Sea for years and years and years. And we cannot go back to the way it was 200 years ago. But we can work towards a more resilient ecosystem, where it can take the hit that we're giving it. Because if we give it this time and space to develop again, then you can create something resilient, because nature is made to be resilient, right? It can have the storms and the impacts, but we need to make it so it can carry that.
Willem, Naturalis is a partner of SSE Renewables and ABP in the Noordzeker wind farm, the IJmuiden Ver Alpha plot. What is your reason for partnering with a wind farm developer?
Well, the main reason is that they shared our opinion that we had to do more than that is legally needed, and go beyond what I said before, the common 5%, but also include the 95%. And also not only measure once or very few, but start measuring continuously as possible, and generate these long time series. There's hardly any long time. I mean, it's North Sea is one of the better studied, at least that is claimed, studied systems in the world, but there are hardly any long time series. So we don't know how the dynamics of the North Sea are.
Is there something specific you would like to discover then? So hard.
No,
question.
that's a really hard.
Yeah.
I mean, I would really like to understand that dynamics. I mean, that it is a dynamic system, and how, and maybe better understanding of how these changes occur, and how we can best help. Because I mean, yeah, nature needs time, but it's definitely possible to give nature a kickstart. But then we have to take into account that the North Sea is not the North Sea, but that the North Sea is also very widely different between areas, and so that we can't use the same in nature conservation, restoration, or what you want to call it. Scaling up is really a big issue. But we have to know, like, how do we have to scale up? Where do we have to scale up? That we avoid that the whole North Sea becomes the same, and that you lose the natural variability that is there, and that the northern part of the Dutch North Sea is very different from the southern and the central part. And we have to take that into account into our actions.
Yeah. Yes.
No, I just want to ask a question to Willem about this. So you start measuring in the Noordzeker wind farm area. I saw also a remark in the chat about the North Sea being an adaptive system, and we already talked about resilience. So maybe we should also compare the measurements within the wind farm area to an area completely in a different place. And also compare, maybe to see how that plays out. If we leave certain areas as a kind of a protected area for 30 plus years, what can develop potentially there? Is that something that's also part of your plan, to measure in and also compare it to outside the wind farms?
It's just for regulation reasons not a part of this plan, because this is about the plot of the wind farm, and we cannot go, I mean, that's just a regulation, we can't go outside. But I would mean, that's my goal. I would love to measure the same either outside, I mean, both outside and in other wind farms, also to see this geographic difference, that we can now do one spot really highly time resolved, but we have to incorporate this space, and so I would love to.
Maybe that's part of for our research agenda then to.
So one more question: did SSE and ABP come to Naturalis? How did you combine forces?
Well, we shared the same. They came. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I wasn't there, so I don't know, and I don't think that's very relevant. The important thing is that this is a big investment, and there was this shared interest in, like, hey, we want to do it. We want to do more than what is really needed, because doing ecology is not just look at a small part of the system. And as a matter of fact, we see this question from many parts of the financial sector coming more and more, that there is this interest in, like, hey, how can we do better? And we appreciate And not only in the sea, but also in other parts. We appreciate biodiversity. How can we do our job the best way?
That's good news that there's
That's
more
very good
interest in that.
Yeah.
Very good. Jaime, you not only build artificial reefs, but you also advise on the best possibility for species in certain areas, such as wind farms, of course. Can you tell us more about it?
Yeah, it's following the line of what Willem was mentioning, that we need to have the data as well in a long-term and continuous manner, not just having just a picture of what was before and after. So before anything is built underwater, we take measurements on water quality, on number of species with eDNA, not only of the famous dolphin in the area, but as well bacteria that are part of the ecosystem. So we see that there's a lot more to measure, providing to indexes and also on advice what are the conditions, abiotic and biotic conditions that those species might need to have to kickstart. So what are, from the engineering perspective, what are the velocities that certain species will need to have between habitat and crevices and pores of the rocks, or maybe like a bigger structures. And there's a lot more to learn as well. But by taking this data and advising and measuring after, our goal is to have that number that we can put back into the formula so we can add value of what nature is bringing, and that this becomes the only way to go to work together with nature and not only as a small compensation on the side.
Because you build for nature and you want to let nature do its work.
Yeah.
And but when do you leave it to the nature? When do you stay completely away from it?
As Peter mentioned in the movie, the reality is that nature can't take over by itself. It's strong, it's resilient, but we need to give them the chance to recover. And the reality is that we are in this dilemma that we are growing as population, there is need of energy, of infrastructure. So there's this conflict of how can we be in harmony. So we see this in two different ways. Building responsibly, so what are you putting on the water? Make sure that it can neutralize the impact of building, because everything that is being built will have an impact and a disturbance. And two, think, can we actually do something better for restoration? Can we change the conditions? Maybe creating some protected areas where no human intervention of no fisheries can happen, that would eventually nourish the surrounding waters and will benefit for fishermen and also for economy to the surrounding countries.
Yeah. What is needed to enable startups and SMEs to contribute to a healthier North Sea? What is needed for that?
It's definitely a challenging journey, because you are in an industry where there is giants, massive companies, and as a small company, you start discussing on the table. But pilots have been definitely like a big milestone. That's why we have been also working with the Rich North Sea. Challenges that gives you perspective and recognition as company. So we also, 4 years ago, there was a big challenge on biodegradable artificial reefs that we won. So that was also for us a great step forward. That definitely helps. And putting the value that you can bring, because you will never compete on size of company, but you will compete on the value that we can bring. Yeah. And that's what we always bring on the table.
I want to ask, I asked the audience a question, can offshore wind farms be nature reserves? What do you think?
I said half. But the fact is that offshore wind farms are placed in spaces that create the least amount of negative effects, right? So they're placed maybe not in the most biodiverse or interesting places for nature to develop. That doesn't mean there's no nature there, right? So it can be a very nice protected area, but we need marine protected areas outside of that as well. And then those areas need to be chosen because it's an interesting natural site, and not because there's a lot of wind there and it doesn't have a lot of impact.
Yeah, okay. And Jaime, what do you think?
Indeed, also half, because it's a mix. I think offshore wind can provide some opportunities by restoring certain habitat conditions and no-take zones in one way to nourish surrounding waters. But we also need to keep those areas that are completely wild and untouched to have nature as it is without extra stressors that we are putting.
Yeah. No human interventions there.
Yeah, and of course it's very conflicted because the North Sea is a busy area, and that seems like impossible at this part. So it's not that we have to keep the whole North Sea untouched, even though we will love as nature enthusiasts. But we just need to start by keeping the small areas and seeing the benefits as well that it brings to surrounding waters. But this becomes also a political problem with so many countries sharing the North Sea. So we're in a classroom without a teacher, and we need to decide what are we going to study. So that's a challenge.
Did you want to comment on that?
No. I wanted to comment on there's no human intervention because there is strong human intervention in a wind farm. No, but I would like to advocate also, the soft bottom communities, and they just receive way less attention. But I'm sure that given time, that they we have examples in the collection of how what could be there. The soft bottom communities at the moment are just completely depaupered, and I'm sure that they, given time again, can recover to much more biomass and value, and also provide more ecosystem services. So they're often shown either as a desert or something like that, but at the moment, in my opinion, they're much more like a meadow that is farmed and where production, their management system is for producing either meat or milk, and in the North Sea that is fish. And there is so much disturbance there that if you have less disturbance, and that would be something many people don't realize, that these windmills are like 1.5 kilometer apart. So there's a huge space in between them, and that would mean that these communities can hopefully recover because it's not allowed to fish inside the park.
We need to, time-wise, we need to hurry a little bit, but I have another question for you, because suppose Peter returns in 10 years with another film about the North Sea, what will he encounter then? There you go.
Good question. Well, you never know, because you can never look into the future like that. But it would be great to see if he could go diving in a wind farm. Probably not, but it would be nice. And then see the stones around it, so the scour protection fully covered. And then not only the stones, but the soft sediment in between as well has had the time to develop. So there's a lot to see there. And then maybe it looks a little bit like the Borkum Reef grounds do now, or around shipwrecks. That would be very nice.
Yeah, I think that's a dream indeed. That by taking that stressor, you can give a chance for those communities to rebound.
Yeah, that will be great. What do you think?
Yeah, similar. I just would like to take climate change again on the table. It will be different. It will be hard to predict which species are more and which are less. We have some ideas, of course, but the exact how it works is going to be. So it will be different, but it will probably be beautiful, because it is beautiful.
Nature is beautiful, and the North Sea is beautiful. Peter, are you hopeful?
Yeah, in 10 years I will film your flapper skate.
That's a good promise. Absolutely. That would be great if that would be happening. Thank you so much for your contribution. Let's wrap things up. Normally I first ask the question to our guests, but Bob, I'm going to ask you a question. In what way has this webinar enriched your vision on the North Sea?
Yeah, I think it has been enriched in many ways. So by changing, I think, the perspective to look from the perspective of the North Sea towards all these human activities, including offshore wind farms, but also climate change. That surfaced a couple of times as also an important pressure on our ecosystem. And also from some of the comments and questions in the chat, we couldn't have asked all those questions. I'm sorry about that, but the resilience aspect is, I think, something that really came back. And so we're looking at a system, if we leave it for some time and create some areas, for example, within wind farms, and also start working in terms of creating, say, hard substrate and experimenting with things, while we are also measuring and studying. And given a bit of time, there's a good perspective on this. So that makes me also hopeful in say, if building with nature and in enhancing ecology with our human activities. So yeah, I find it a very positive outcome. That's at least how I read this.
Thank you so much for that. I have a question for you as well, all. Please, short answers. But what kind of research question would you like to hand to Bob on the importance of the North Sea ecosystem and the role offshore wind can play to enhance it? Eline?
Very good question. I think we need to look at the combination, right? I call myself an ecologist, but the more I know I don't know a lot. So we need to look at the connections. How can we help nature at the same time while we're using, its functions, so the ecological functions it offers. And I think what you also mentioned is we shouldn't only focus on inside of the offshore wind farm, but we need to look outside of that as well. It's very important. So what are the most beneficial knobs to turn? Where are the most, the highest impacts we can make? And we should focus on that.
Noted. Yeah.
It's noted. Thank you so much. Jaime, for you?
Well, Willem is collecting a lot of data that I think can be very powerful as well to bring it into an indicator and index that we can put back into that formula. So it is on the price of a project. You see that in inland projects already, the emissions are in the milieu cost indicator and the environmental cost indicator, but there's no biodiversity there. So definitely something that I see lots of potential.
And they wrote it down.
Yeah,
I saw it. Thank you so much for that, Jaime. Willem?
Yeah, my really short answer would be embrace dynamics and understand dynamics. That is key. Yeah.
So study it.
And study it, of course.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Oh, I have the same question for Peter and Teun. Peter, you have a.
How do we keep and strengthen nature when the wind turbines are technically end of life?
Excellent question. Yeah, I will take that on board.
Yes, and we recorded it as well. So if you didn't write it down, for Teun as well.
Yeah, I think the ambition is clear today. So for me, it's really about setting together an action agenda, like a transition agenda together, and continue learning and developing, but also doing things like that you're doing now in the Rijke Noordzee and with your reefs. I think it's super important, and doing this also in a non-conventional way. So not only production targets, but perhaps with other professionals, designers, artists, and see what can come out of that.
Interesting.
Very interesting, and a lot of homework, I think, there for you. Bob.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much, all of you. We'll see each other on the next edition. I think that's December the 3rd.
Yeah.
What will be the subject then?
Yeah, at that time we will be looking back at some of the results of the innovation program, but also looking forward to what's coming in the next year. So, yeah.
So we can't wait for that. Any other events to look forward to?
Yeah, in fact, tomorrow we've got the kickoff of our open innovation call for robotization. So quite a different topic, but very relevant. So that's tomorrow. You can find information on our website about that. And also on the 18th of November, we've got our energy talks. And I think this is a much wider event organized by the top sector Energie or Energy Innovation NL. And also information about that you can find on our website. So, yeah.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, guests. Great that you were here, Willem, Peter, and Teun, and Eline, and Jaime. Thank you for enhancing our love for the North Sea. Great you were here. Also, thanks to our live audience. Thanks for watching, and thanks for being there online. Thanks to our viewers. I think we conclude this edition of TKI Offshore Energy Live, and I'll see you next time.